Hey everyone, Michael Morgan here. So we're here this week for Album of the Week to talk about a band called Steely Dan and an album called Asia. It was the late 1970s, about 1978, and Steely Dan had done something that most bands would never dream of. They had actually decided to not go on the road. They weren't going to be a touring band. They were strictly going to be a band that worked in the studio, record their albums, release them, but not go out to report them. There were only two members of the band at this point, Donald Fagen and Walter Becker, and they were going to rely upon studio musicians, but really only the cream of the crop studio musicians, some really amazing studio players. And these two guys were really rooted in jazz. They had met at Bard College in upstate New York in the late 1960s, about 1968, I think. And they had a real love of jazz, and they were playing rock and roll. And they weren't trying to go for a jazz fusion thing. They were just kind of letting it happen. So it was a different sound to this album. They'd had a lot of success with their rock and roll sound, especially their first album, Can't Buy a Thrill, 1972. They had released a brilliant second album called Countdown to Ecstasy, which not that many people loved, but it really just showcased what amazing musicians they were. By 77, 78, they were willing to be a little more experimental, and they brought in some great people to back them up in the studio. They decided they were going to call it Asia, A-J-A, for the spelling. Side one of the album had 3 songs, 9 to 10 minutes each. It started out with a track called Black Cow, which when you listen to it, you really can't decide whether it is funk or rock and roll or jazz or blues. It's got some elements of all of that in it. There's humor in it and seriousness at the same time. Really great track. The second track is the title track itself, Asia. At one point it has Donald Fagen playing a police whistle, which I thought was kind of out there. The third track on side one got an immense amount of radio airplay, called Deacon Blues. And this album really helped to pave the way for FM radio to be willing to play longer songs. These were not studio edits. They were playing the long versions, the original recordings. Asia itself was quite a mellow song, very deep, great for late at night listening. I remember buying this album when I was in about the 6th grade, and I would put this one on with the lights off and just let side one play over and over and over again. Now, when you flipped over to side two, 4 tracks on it, and it was a little more upbeat, a little more typical what you would expect to hear, a little more guitar-driven. Walter Becker, who had actually started out as the bass player in the band, had switched over to guitar. Their original guitar player was a guy named Jeff Skunk Baxter, who had left after they decided to quit touring, and he joined the Doobie Brothers and had quite a good career with the Doobie Brothers. And then after that, through just this weird set of circumstances, he became one of the nation's experts on missile defense and the Strategic Defense Initiative. And it's still to this day consults on stuff like that. But Becker switched from playing bass to playing guitar and had just a slightly different approach to it because of that. It was really, really good. So especially in the last track on the album called Josie. So the album had a big impact because it had that jazz influence and longer songs, and people in radio were willing to take a chance to play longer songs. Musicians loved it. The record industry liked it. The artists involved didn't get a lot of credit for it except from other people in the music industry who would recognize, oh wow, that's Timothy B. Schmidt from the Eagles singing backup, or that's Michael McDonald from the Doobie Brothers who was singing backup, or the saxophone player was Wayne Shorter, who was a really well-known jazz musician, folks like that. So it worked really well for them. After the album came out, they considered touring, which they had not done in a while, but that didn't work out, didn't go on the road. They did a song for a disastrous film about a radio station called FM, which was very loosely based on a radio station here in Los Angeles called KMET, but the song took off, was a top 10 song itself, but the movie itself bombed. And then not long afterwards, the band kind of went into hiatus, disappeared for about 10 or 12 years, and then came back with a fury and really did great. And they're still out now. Walter Becker passed away 2-3 years ago, but Donald Fagen still takes them out on the road pretty much every summer. So I strongly recommend you take a listen to this. Side 1, you got to listen to it all the way through. Don't interrupt it. Just let it play one song into the next, and probably take a listen to it late at night. That's what it pretty much sets the mood properly for. Okay, hope you enjoy that one. This is Morgan, signing off.